Everyone, and welcome to the Amplitude of Tech podcast. I'm Shawn Cordner, Chief Marketing Officer of Amplix. This is the Inside Amplix edition of the podcast. What does that mean? We're going to bring you thought leadership from Amplix employees, actionable intel and insights that we've learned by doing thousands and thousands of technology transformation projects. Hope you enjoy the episode. All right, Stanton Smith, thank you for joining Inside Amplix. This is our early edition of Inside Amplix. You're one of the first few people that we've talked to, so thanks for being a guinea pig for that as well.
No, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Looking forward to it. Stan, you've got that radio voice, so I'm feeling a little threatened that you might take my job as host here. I hope the audience doesn't enjoy it too much. But if you
yeah, no worries.
Save your letters and your emails. I don't want to hear it. So let's start off with just, who you are, a quick background on you, and then what you do here at Amplix.
Yeah, sure. So I am VP of our CX consulting and solution engineering groups. So my background is working in contact centers, helping contact centers evaluate the right technology, make sure it's a good fit. So I lead out a couple of different teams here. One is focused on the engineering aspect, the technical aspects of what goes into a platform to make it successful, how it's going to work within a client environment to give desired outcomes. With the consulting team, it's focused more around the business outcomes. Who are the right stakeholders that we need to have engaged? What does the ROI TCO look like for any given project? How do we prioritize different things and making sure that we're making sound both business and financial decisions when talking about tech?
Got it. So I want to hover on the transformation consulting. That's what I really wanted to talk about today. So give me a little bit more detail. What is transformation consulting?
Yeah, so transformation consulting is when a lot of times clients have an idea that they know they need to do something, but they're not ready to talk about tech yet. They don't know where they need to start. They don't want to start talking to different tech providers around solutions. They need to make sure that they've got things in order first. So where transformation consulting comes in is we identify one of our senior consultants, we get them plugged in to really focus on the people, the process, the technology, and the AI readiness of an organization, depending on what the project scope is. So as part of that, it's looking at who's doing what within the business. How is the work flowing? Is it efficient? Where are the pain points? Where are your end customers' pain points? And how do we resolve those? Where can we make things more efficient within the processes and flows of your company? And who's doing what? Do people have responsibility for the work that they're doing? Do they have power over that as well to affect change within their particular role?
Got it. And why is this something that people can't do themselves?
A lot of times, honestly, it comes down to availability, resources, and expertise. Everybody's got a day job. A lot of people are just focused on doing what they need to do, staying on top of it, staying half a step ahead of the game at times. And by having someone who can come in and do a neutral validation assessment of what's going on within the organization, it really allows a lot of people to continue focusing on what they need to do. It doesn't stop or slow down the business. And it gives that extra layer of expertise within there to make sure that what's being documented and what's being recommended is in line with best practices across various industries.
I used to run a branding agency, and we would do brand strategy projects all the time. And part of that is interviewing stakeholders, including the key people at the business, people that ran the business, the founders, whatever, the executives. And I almost always found that there was a disconnect between the value that they thought that they were delivering in the marketplace and the value that their customers perceived from the relationship. And that gap was a problem for them, right? There was a misalignment between how they were going to market and how they were trying to position themselves versus, what the real value was. I think it's because from experience, you kind of build up a perspective and you see things that reinforce this idea, right? Confirmation bias. And it's hard to just kind of separate yourself from what you know and see a different perspective. So do you think that sometimes an outside perspective of, a real seasoned veteran that they would be working with on the Amplix side is one of the big values of this?
Absolutely. Like you mentioned, there's often disconnects at various points throughout the business. Upper leadership is focused on the strategic priorities within the business, how they're focused on the direction that they want to head in. Middle management is focused on the teams that they have. Is everybody doing what they're supposed to be doing? And frontline people are focused on doing the best that they can, taking care of the clients that they need to and the job that they have. but rarely is there a full seamless thread and understanding between all of these different individuals of what's actually happening within the business. And that's an area where we really help expand on that for visibility across the organization. We'll gather, for example, like 10,000 call recordings or email interactions and summarize those and be able to present, here's why your clients are contacting you. Here's how they're contacting you. Here's what it has to go through in order to get to somebody. And here's what the outcomes are. X% of the time, people are frustrated, or, people can't get to where they need quickly and have to be transferred around. It makes for a poor customer experience. So we're able to look at it from a holistic point of view and bring together recommendations that make for not only a seamless client experience, but also internally making sure that everybody understands the different roles, responsibilities, and has power to be successful.
Sure. So it's data driven too. Then it's not just a subjective opinion from a consultant. This is actually based off of some foundational data.
Absolutely. We'll not only look at interactions, but then we'll also interview different stakeholders throughout the business, whether it's executive leadership, frontline folks, or anyone in between. We want to make sure that we understand not only how everyone does their job, but how do they perceive themselves doing their job, and what's their understanding of what others should be doing. And this is an area that oftentimes is highlighted where one group of people might feel that they're responsible for something, whereas a different group within the business has a completely different understanding of that other group. And by helping bridge those gaps, it makes for a very smooth client experience.
So I've heard you say anyone can tell you what's broken, but Amplix tells you what to do about it and in what order. So what does that mean? And how do you go about prioritizing areas of opportunity?
Well, a big piece of it is identifying what the objectives of the engagement are to begin with. Some people will say, hey, we really need to focus on not transferring our clients from where they land. They need to we need to make sure that they land in the right spot every time. Other times it's looking at somebody who says, hey, we've had the same system in place for 10, 15, 20 years. We've never changed it. The marketplace has changed. Technology has changed. And the way that we're architected right now probably isn't efficient. We want you to look at that as well. So we'll understand what the desired goals and outcomes are of the project. And then as we go along, identify use cases, which are the areas that are going to be the most impactful to least impactful within the business. And then alongside those, which are going to be the heaviest lift versus the lightest? Where can we get the biggest impact out of the gate that's going to be meaningful for the business? Where should time be prioritized?
Yeah, that's a great way to go about doing it. Make sure that you start to see some benefit immediately from the engagement. And I'm sure there are some things that you uncover that just really need correcting and then are just begging to be corrected immediately. And then there's probably a long tail things that, are marginal in terms of impact, but in aggregate, they can have a big impact as well, right? So it's this idea of a continuum of action. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So AI is obviously what everyone's talking about. And in the contact center, I think AI was one of the first places that enterprises started to adopt it. There's a lot of opportunity to buy AI there versus build it. And it can have a significant impact pretty quickly as well. So, I'm wondering what percentage of the answers to the challenges that you're uncovering are AI-based solutions versus, more technology-driven or process-driven interventions?
Yeah, that's a great question. Everybody's talking about AI right now. Everybody knows they need to do something with it in order to not get left behind. One of the consultants on my team, I like the way that he put it. He said, AI isn't the destination, it's the vehicle. It's not a shortcut, it's a tool. And if you layer AI into bad data or bad processes, it will only amplify them. So it's important that we identify how things should be structured and then layer in AI where appropriate. The goal isn't to just plug AI into anything and everything. It needs to be done in a smart, thoughtful, strategic way. This is an area where we see a lot of impact, not only for clients, but also for employees. Within the contact center, there can be work that at times can be very mundane. And those types of interactions that are just very repeatable, people are looking for something within a knowledge base, or they need to check an order status or reset a password. Those are areas that are very ripe for AI to be able to handle those types of interactions. Whereas areas where there might be a more complex customer engagement and interaction, something where they really need to understand better from the client's point of view what they're doing within your business, or within healthcare especially, we see this a lot, where an agent is better suited to handle the interaction.
Interesting. Our CEO, I've heard him say a few times now in reference to us adopting AI internally is, we don't want to do bad faster, right? So we don't want to automate through AI the things that we're not doing right or not doing well, because it, like you said, it's just going to amplify it. I think we're at a point in the AI adoption curve where enterprises at least are talking less about LLMs and generative AI and more about agentic AI, starting to see a lot of adoption of AI agents and quickly expanding the footprint of the agents that are in the organization. So I think that automating workflows and processes with agentic AI is a great promise for efficiency and potentially cost savings and better customer experience. But like you said, you don't want to layer AI on top of bad processes. So what does that look like, and what's the potential outcome if you do?
Yeah, and I want to make sure that we differentiate between AI agents from a back office workflow automation type perspective and AI agents in the contact center that are engaging either over voice or digital channels with clients to solve concerns. So with AI, a lot of times what we'll see, I lost my train of thought. So right before I started on there, we'll get back to it. It was, remind me what that last part of your question was.
What does it look like? So what does it look like to layer AI onto bad processes, and what are the potential outcomes?
Right. So with AI, it's really important that we make sure that the right processes are identified. When we're looking at something that can be automated, on the surface, it sounds really good. You say, oh yeah, this is something we do all the time. We can just get that function automated. But it's one of those things that when you start thinking about it for a minute longer, then you realize there's a little more complexity in this. What are all the different possible outcomes and scenarios that could come with this? And is there potential for something to go wrong within this? Not only that, but what are we doing with the information that we get out of this? Some things are very simple, repeatable tasks that never change and they're always the same. Great. Let's automate those, take that workload off everybody's plate. A lot of times, focusing on AI agents in the contact center point of view, it's good not only to see what they can do for end clients, but then understand what are we using that data for? And that's where the AI technologies blend a little farther between what the AI agent is doing and what the human agents are doing. All day long, we're talking to customers, understanding what their pain points are, what they like, what they don't like about our business, why somebody is buying your product or not, why somebody is using you for healthcare or not. And a lot of times, companies don't do anything with that data. We hear all the time on calls, this call may be monitored for supervisor purposes. And, maybe somebody listens to that call to say, oh, did you do a good job with the client? But if you can capture that across your entire business, then you can have AI drill in and understand trends. Why are people calling? When are they calling? What are their pain points? What are their frustrations? And that helps you develop in your marketing materials. It helps you develop your product offerings. It helps you develop in your customer service departments and the way that you care for the employees and clients that you have. And so it really helps uncover a lot of things that ordinarily are hidden simply for lack of expertise, time, and insight.
Yeah. So you've done 300 plus of these kind of transformation engagements. What are the things that, most commonly look okay from the outside or even from the inside? You think things are functioning just fine, but when you look under the hood a little bit closer, they're broken?
Yeah, some of it comes down to SLAs. What are different groups measured on and what are their individual goals and metrics? What are their incentives within teams? Because there are certainly times where a particular group within a contact center on paper looks like they're hitting all of their goals. The numbers are great. There's no concern for anything. But by going through an analysis like this and looking at it from a different perspective, seeing the art of the possible of what could be done in another way, it really helps identify areas for efficiency that benefit the business as a whole.
Are there any things that you see sometimes that are perceived as being broken or flawed from the clients that you're dealing with, but it turns out that it's actually not a priority or not as big of a challenge as they expected?
Yeah. So one area where at times businesses might feel that they're doing poorly in an area, but they're actually doing really well is related to handle time, for example. In a contact center, handle time is a very important metric. We want to make sure that it's optimized. But that doesn't necessarily mean that shorter interactions are better interactions. And we see within contact centers in doing engagements like this, that at times the interactions that are taking the most amount of time are actually adding the most value to your end customer and making sure that they feel valued and are retained.
That's a great answer, because you don't want to look at this like an MBA and you're just purely looking at reducing the amount of time that we're spending so we can increase the number of calls that we're handling without increasing the number of agents that we need to handle it, right? What you really have to keep in mind is what you're looking for is a good customer experience. That's ultimately the metric, because all the other metrics like CSAT and handle time and containment, those are, secondary and tertiary metrics that really are signifying what your customer experience looks like, but it's not a direct correlation, right?
Absolutely. And that's the directive that we come in every time, is focused on what is going to be best for the end customer and build our recommendations around that, because that's what's ultimately going to create that loyalty, not only of your clients, but of your employees.
Is that an area where maybe sometimes they'll push back on your findings? In other words, you come back and say, hey, handle times aren't a problem. We don't need to look at that. I think you're creating value with those calls that are taking longer. And they push back on you and say, no, we need to get these down.
That has happened before. I'd say one area where more pushback comes in is, for example, different groups might have a lot of disparate systems, and depending on the type of call being handled, it has to be routed through different things. An agent might have to pull up a lot of different systems, and understanding where there can be some consolidation of that effort. Normalization of tools across the enterprise is something that it's a big lift. It's challenging, and not a lot of companies are eager or have the appetite for taking on a project of that magnitude, but that's an area that we help out with as well. We have pro services implementation work on the contact center side. That's something that we can very quickly do for a lot of our clients.
I talk to a lot of CIOs and technology leaders here at Amplix, and one trend that I'm picking up on a lot is they are working on license rationalization and optimizing the number of licenses they have, but also looking for redundancies in platforms. So, you've got two software packages, but one can do both functions. Why aren't you using the one and eliminate the second one? Do you see that a lot in CX environments?
We do. And a lot of it comes down to, again, what's the end goal and objective? There are many platforms that have a lot of features across the spectrum, whether it's, of course, the core contact center, but then workforce management, QA, QM, AI agents. These are different areas that all are part of or adjacent to the contact center. And sometimes those are great fits for a client. Other times you might want to layer in a best of breed for one of these particular areas within the business. It's never the same answer. It all depends on what your goals and objectives are, what's really important. If there's one key area that absolutely has to stand out from the others, it might be worthwhile looking at a point solution for that.
It takes a lot of experience and inside knowledge of both the operations of the contact center, but also of the vendor ecosystem then to help make those decisions. Would you agree?
It does. And that's an area where our consultants really shine. All of them have backgrounds in contact center, in operating contact centers, managing them. And we look at literally hundreds of providers every year, vetting their solutions, staying on top of what's going on in the market, what are best practices across industries, and being able to give that insight, that expertise to client teams. That's an area where we really shine and come through.
You mentioned people versus process versus technology, people and process and technology. And those are kind of the three areas that you're looking at when you're doing one of these consulting engagements. Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So on the people front, it's what are people doing and is their power aligned to their responsibility? Are people responsible for things that they can't impact at all? That makes for a bad employee experience and it makes for bad reporting as well. So who sits where, who's doing what are they responsible for, making sure that those are aligned. From a process perspective, are there areas where processes can be streamlined? Where are the inefficiencies? Where is there duplication of efforts within the business, and help cut down on those areas? And the technology is one where we identify, with the current technology that you have in place, what can you do? How can you better leverage it? A lot of times clients will buy a software solution and they have it. They know it can do a bunch of cool things because they heard in a demo before they bought it that it could do all this, but they know they're not using it to its full potential. This is an area where our consultants can really come in and say, well, here's how to make this happen. Here's how you should be utilizing this tech to maximize the value within your business. And then identifying gaps. Here are areas where there are technologies available that you're not using today that you could be using that would add a lot of value or lift to one particular area of the business.
Yeah. I know that AI readiness is part of this consultation engagement. It's obviously part of the life cycle at this point, right? And that we have an AI impact assessment that's kind of a standalone offering for businesses that are just looking to see how AI could be layered into their contact center. But I'm wondering, what is an enterprise that's ready for AI look like? What does that mean?
I'd say the number one thing is the data is clean and organized. If that's in place, AI can be successful. Now, obviously, there's little nuances and things that you'll need to do to make sure that it's optimized and working correctly. But if the data is bad, AI will only amplify the problem that they have.
Yeah. Can you give me an example of a transformation for a client that went well and what made the difference?
Yeah. So we did one recently for a client. They had a lot of disparate groups. They had close to a dozen different groups within the business utilizing different tools. Each one had a different process. Some were aligned well with what they could impact, and others had no ability to impact what it was that they were being graded on. Other areas were poor customer satisfaction because when they got to one area, not every customer calls in only wanting one particular thing. And when they had to call in, get to one area to get that one piece solved, and then get transferred to somebody else to get the second piece solved, and then a third person to get the next piece, it made for a very fragmented customer journey. And it just wasn't a good experience. And so by aligning not only the work being done within organizations, but then layering in, for example, an agent assist tool, so that as an agent is interacting with someone, the system can automatically pop up to them answers to the client's question or point them in the right spot to go, making sure that what the client needs and the input that we're getting from the client are being routed and handled appropriately.
Yeah. What's a pattern that you're seeing in the industry that people aren't talking about, or maybe an emergent trend that you see coming?
I think this is one that you hit on earlier. A lot of times people are talking about AI with LLMs and other things, but it's really back-end process automation. There's a lot of value that can be had in that. That's an area where some people are talking about it. Not as many have actually successfully done something with it just yet.
Yeah. It seems like low-hanging fruit, but it also seems incredibly risky, especially if you're starting to deal with, agent-to-agent communication and, how do you manage and monitor that? How do you authenticate that? I mean, there's a lot of cybersecurity risk and potential for things to go wrong with that. Do you think that's a big point of friction here, and that's why we're not seeing wider rollouts yet? Or is it just people don't have the knowledge yet?
I think it's twofold. One absolutely is the risk perspective of it. That's another thing that we can do here at Amplix is understand what your security structures look like, what your AI governance framework should be like. What are best practices within that? Are things designed correctly? And as the business grows and evolves, is it being tuned and optimized correctly? The other area is knowledge. People hear about it, but they don't have the time to really jump in and understand how to make it happen efficiently and effectively. People might get, 30 minutes here, an hour there to kind of play around with different AI tools and look at them, but that doesn't bring about a meaningful business outcome.
Any advice for people listening to this that say, you know what, I don't want to bring in a third party. I want to tackle this in-house?
For people who want to tackle it in-house, I'd say be prepared to spend more time than you think you're going to need to spend, and understand that there are downstream implications of processes that are automated that you might not see on the surface. And so you really just got to be watching out for those. But of course, I'd also say that's where we shine. That's where we come in. Let us take that off your plate.
Yeah. Last question. Can you fix my mobile phone carrier, please? Because every time I call them, I get transferred 10 times and I have to re-authenticate who I am, and it's like pulling teeth. I'll give you the name after the podcast, but can we get a salesperson to make some calls there?
We absolutely can do that. We got a whole mobility group can take care of things for you.
Perfect. Appreciate it. Stan, thanks so much for your time and expertise. This was great.
Yep. Thanks for having me, Shawn.